Veteran quarterbacks are all of a sudden at a premium, and they don't even have to have been good players in the past. We'll talk about Sam Darnold and more here on Locked On NFL.
The barbershop is open and Tony Wiggins has a chair for you. He's ready with some real NFL talk. The local experts of Locked On bring their expertise, and Wiggy is ready with his clippers and shears. Sit down and enjoy. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
That's right. It is your team every day. Welcome to the new Locked On NFL, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with the help of our local experts that know your favorites like no one else. I am the host, the barber, Tony Wiggins, joined today by Locked On NFL expert Matt Williamson. On today's episode, we're going to talk about some very interesting stuff. In the third segment, game of the week, Bills versus Texans. Talk about some old people in new places and how they do against their new team, and also run through all of the games and let Matt let you know who he thinks is going to win. In the middle of the show, is KC now a defensive team, and is it sustainable? Are they going to continue to win that way? And first, we're going to start out with Kirk has his swag in the ATL, and guess what? Kirk's old home, they got a quarterback named Sam Darnold who's got a little swag. We'll talk about that and how the games are being played and why guys who've been around for a long time are now all of a sudden more valuable in the National Football League. We appreciate you making us your first listen of the day, for being an everydayer here on Locked On NFL, which is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure you tune in again on Locked On NFL every morning for the madman Tyler Rowland for more NFL coverage. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. That's right, man. FanDuel is the place where your first $5 bet can get you started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Matt Williamson, longtime NFL scout, longtime everything that's superlative about Matt Williamson has to do with the NFL. And Matt, I want to know this. Have you noticed, and we talked about it, the difference with the way the game is played? Why are these veteran quarterbacks, guys that have been around, seemingly having success, even in new places? And it seems like the big plays are going away, and these check down guys, these guys that know the game, they're figuring out how to matriculate the ball down the field and be patient about it.
I think that's a lot of it. We could go hours and hours on this subject, but over the last 2 years, like looking at opening day, the average age of quarterbacks has been unusually low. And the reason for it, I think, is teams are looking for that advantage of, if I can get a franchise quarterback on a rookie deal, I can go get everything else, and boy, I'm going to be the best team builder ever. The problem is the college game is really nothing like the NFL game. I mean, the ball is even different. I mean, like, you got to adjust to the speed of the game at a very rapid rate. And the older I get, and maybe the wiser I get, who knows, maybe just see the world a little different in my old age. But I think it's funny that we think drafting Caleb Williams will all of a sudden turn the Bears into a superstar overnight. You know, I mean, that's just too much to ask for anyone. You know, Sam Bradford, Jamarcus Russell, we can go back in time. I mean, we're going to put you on one of the worst organizations in the league, and with 10 teammates. It's not even basketball where you can control the ball and, you know, you only have 4 guys around you, and even the LeBrons of the world take a while to turn teams around. But we're going to put you out there on this huge field with the 21 other human beings, 10 of them your friends, 11 of them are trying to decapitate you, and you're going to change the fortunes of a bad franchise. And Tony, we've even talked about this a couple times. We've only had a couple shows, but not all franchises are the same. I mean, some are much worse at what they do from the top down. And they're the ones that usually get the Sam Darnolds of the world early in the draft, or Baker Mayfield first overall, et cetera, et cetera. And I think, needless to say, if I was in charge or a key component of a multi-billion-dollar organization, which is what a starting quarterback is asked to do, I would be way more equipped to handle it when I was 28 than the 21-year-old version of Matt Williamson. You know what I mean? Coming out of college thinking my you know what doesn't stink, and I'm the best thing in the world, and this game's easy, and you know, then you get in a locker room, a bunch of 30-year-olds that have 3 kids, and millions in the bank, and they look at you funny like you're the answer. I mean, come on, man, And then you kind of hinted to it. On the field, I also think is important because so much zone, so much too high stuff that these older guys have adjusted to the speed of the game. And now they're saying, you're just going to play zone against me? This is kind of easy. I'll pick it apart. I'll be mature.
Yeah, so young guys too, man, they're impatient. So, they want the big chunk plays. They want the Patrick Mahomes beautiful throws, and they want all of that stuff. Older guys, no, we're just going to take our time. And we saw an older guy who has actually made a lot of money, who was somebody else's trash in Minnesota because he was injured. How Kirk Cousins played last night, 500 some odd yards on like 40 some odd completions. Listen to Aaron Freeman, Locked On Falcons.
Kirktober starts with a bang with a thrilling Falcons overtime win over the Bucs. I'm Aaron Freeman with Locked On Falcons. We wondered if the calendar turning from September to October would mean success for Kirk Cousins and the Falcons offense, as it often has throughout his career, and it absolutely delivered in a thrilling 36-30 overtime win over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to kick off Week 5 on Thursday Night Football. Cousins threw for 509 yards, 4 touchdowns, had a late game interception, but the Falcons defense, after a rough first half, stepped up, got a stop, and Cousins led the team down the field to set up a 52-yard game-tying field goal from Younghoe Koo to send it into overtime, where Kadero Hodge broke loose on the opening drive for a 45-yard walk-off touchdown. For more coverage of this big NFC South win, follow Locked On Falcons, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So the reason why I wanted to highlight Kirk Cousins there is because they drafted a young quarterback, but then they said, you know what? We still need to see the rest of our team be able to function, because last year everybody was calling all of the receivers and the running backs and the tight ends that they took a bust. They had to get somebody in there that was proven. They're going to let their young guys sit and watch. And Kirk can be doing well in Atlanta, while the team that let him go, you think, okay, you guys let him go, y'all are silly. No, because they did the same thing. They drafted a young guy but chose a cheaper option as a veteran who was going to play even if that young guy didn't get hurt, in J.J. McCarthy and Sam Darnold. And now Minnesota saying, no harm, no foul. He's doing good, but we're doing fine too with Sam Darnold.
Yeah, and I don't really have a whole lot to add to that, except for, Baker's one of those guys. It looks like Fields might be turning into one of those guys. And really the best example, I think, in the whole league, and he wasn't a top 10 pick, but he was an early second, is Geno Smith in Seattle. I mean,
good point.
He's playing as well as anybody. I mean, he's playing better than 90% of the quarterbacks out there, and he has it figured out.
That's a very, very good point. And maybe the league needs to figure it out too. Like, you can do both. You can get a rookie, but you don't have to necessarily think you're going to hit lightning in a bottle the way Jaden Daniels has in Washington. You can just have a sound plan, and don't plan on something like they planned on Caleb coming in and turning around. Just bring guys in and let it organically happen by itself. I think just like Steph Curry affected all of these kids shooting 35-foot fadeaways, Patrick Mahomes has spoiled a lot of people in the National Football League. But they're 4-0, but they're not doing it the way everybody else is trying to copycat. I'm going to get to that in just a second here and tell you why the Chiefs have become downright defensive. We'll do that in the second segment here on Locked On NFL. Today's show is brought to you and sponsored by PrizePicks. That's right, man. PrizePicks is the absolute truth, and you can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. By picks, what I mean is going more than or less than on the player projections that PrizePicks has selected. Now, the good thing about this is just you against them. You're not playing against the other 5 million people that have downloaded PrizePicks and that play it religiously every week. No, it's just you against those projections. So it's all in your hands, man. Do you think Justin Jefferson's going to get 83.5 yards receiving, go more or less, and then put that with something else like Tyreek Hill having more than 97.5 receiving yards, which I doubt because they can't get him the ball, and you can win too? Between 2 to 6 projections, and guess what? The money starts absolutely rolling in. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. I'm going to spell it again, LOCKEDON NFL. That is the code for you to use to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 bet. win or lose. It is PrizePicks, man. Make sure you download the app and use that code and check it out. All right, Locked On NFL segment 2 here. We talked a lot about quarterbacks in new places, old guys doing things that they didn't do before. There's a guy named Patrick Mahomes that came in, and actually people think that his success was instantaneous. It was not. Patrick Mahomes didn't play but one game his rookie year. They had Alex Smith at the time, so they had a comprehensive plan, and then he jumped all over the league like gangbusters. Lately, though, the Chiefs have had some offensive struggles because they've had some injuries. They've also had some attrition, a little bit of an issue with their left tackle. Let's hear during the crossover between the Saints and the Chiefs. Let's hear exactly what Locked On Chiefs says might need to improve for them to move forward.
It's going to be interesting to watch this game and see how it plays out, because one of the things that's really stuck out to me with the Chiefs is you go back and you watch, they've allowed a touchdown every single game this year on the first drive. And then you go back and you watch what they've done the rest of the game, and it's like it's completely different. So you almost expect them at this point, and that's kind of how they played a lot of last season, is they'd allow a score early, and then they'd settle in, and they get to the point where they could, hold down the fort. That's what they have to do on defense again this week. They're going to have to, try to get after Derek Carr and see how they can do that. But offensively, it's going to have to run through Travis Kelce. I mean, you have a new rookie wide receiver in Xavier Worthy, who had a great touchdown catch last week on a deep ball by Mahomes. But one of the things that's really stuck out with this offense is Mahomes is averaging, I think, just over 5 air yards per attempt.
Yeah.
Lowest,
it hasn't been the big play
in the
offense we're used to, right?
It's a dink and dunk, and that's a big problem. And, you have to be able to get that figured out. You have to get your offense to where it can move the ball better, and you have to have explosive plays. They're also down, I think, maybe 4th from last in the NFL in explosive plays.
Matt, they're taking a play out of the playbook of the Patriots. The Patriots, Tom Brady's most successful years statistically in New England, they didn't win. They didn't win one championship with Randy Moss and Wes Welker together. They won most of the time when they were doing exactly what the Chiefs are doing this year. Is it sustainable for Kansas City? Is this the new way, or is this just what they got to do until all of these new wide receivers get used to what's going on?
Well, you mentioned it in the first segment, along the lines of these older quarterbacks don't have to hit a home run every time they come to the plate. They're happy with a walk or a single, and then they steal second and you eventually score anyway, and I thought Mahomes last year already became that guy. Josh Allen is becoming that guy where I'll beat you with, death by 1,000 paper cuts. If that's what you're going to give me and you're going to take away the big play, sure. But I don't also think the offseason showed us that the Chiefs realize if we can get Marquise Brown and Worthy to open things up, because we can't trust Travis forever, and we do need to probably create more explosives. That would be wonderful. We know Mahomes is always capable for sure. But I also think injuries are a factor. That they don't want to put a ton on Kelce's plate. The Rice injury is a big deal. Pacheco is a big deal. I know running backs don't matter, but he's reliable. And you don't have Marquise Brown as part of the equation, and Worthy's probably figuring things out. And as you mentioned, I think they have offensive tackle issues. So I almost find it funny, because if the problems, I'm putting that in quote, are we're 4-0 and we're hoping Pat Mahomes turns into a really good player again, I think that's not so terrible. You know what I mean? That's not like we don't have an offensive line and our quarterback stinks. We hope Pat Mahomes becomes awesome again, which 99.9% chance he will. And in the meantime, we haven't lost. That's not so bad. Yeah.
And then you got a defensive coordinator in Steve Spagnuolo that's won like 5 Super Bowls, right? And you give him Chris Jones, and you give him McDuffie, and you give him a whole bunch of linebackers that nobody knows about that are really good players. And Brendan Daly has them playing out of their mind. And you end up with a team that kind of looks like the dynasty that they replaced in New England, where they just keep on trucking along. You don't really understand how important it is when you say, like you said, Patrick Mahomes, he's going to still be Patrick Mahomes when he needs to. There's some quarterbacks in the AFC South that need to figure out who they are. And 2 of them played this weekend. I don't know if the Colts are going to play Anthony Richardson. I talked to Jake Arthur from Locked On Colts, and he discussed whether or not a healthy Joe Flacco is better than a limping Anthony Richardson, but I'm more concerned with their opponents. We're going to hear what he says, and I'm going to come back and let you lambaste the team that I actually cover every single day. But your honest opinion, if he is not himself and they have to play a quarterback from the pocket, wouldn't you rather that be Joe Flacco than Anthony Richardson?
Yeah, I'm kind of the thinking right now that if Anthony can't be fully Anthony, like if all he's really going to be able to do is pass in this one, I think I would just use Joe Flacco. Mm-hmm. And Jacksonville's pass defense is not doing well. They're not getting after the quarterback at any ferocious rate. So you're probably better just putting Joe out there in this one and letting Anthony get a little bit better. And you have an AFC South game again next week against the Titans. So, I mean, if there's really no threat of him running,
right,
then I probably wouldn't do it.
Well, I don't know who they're going to play. Jonathan Taylor probably won't play with a high ankle sprain. I do know this. If the Colts win this game, there's going to be heads to roll here in Jacksonville. What is your assessment of Trevor Lawrence, for one, and then Doug Peterson, and then the team building of Trent Baalke?
I don't dislike the team building. I mean, I understand that he wants bigger, stronger, faster on defense. And I remember, I think it was a year ago, you joined us on Peacock and Williamson, and we had a long talk about Derrick Henry's in this division. Jonathan Taylor's in this division. We need to be the bully against these teams. They're going to run right at us. And all in all, defensively, I don't think it's a terrible team build. The secondary could use some help, and their best corner's out, and that's hard to overcome. And yeah, it'd be better if you had Hutchinson than Walker. But overall, I can't crush him team building wise. But I think the lack of physicality on offense is obvious. Like ATN to me can't be my staple ball carrier. The O-line never seems trustworthy. And I think it started to happen last year. And I'll be honest, I've been very, very much a Lawrence believer, apologist, not because he was first pick in the draft, because I think if you study the All-22 last year, he had a rough go of things. I mean, got a ton of value taken away from drops, couldn't count on a run game. O-line was shaky, to be kind. And I think then he started to distrust or lose confidence in those around him. And now I think it really reflects on the field. Can he get it back? Yes, but I think they're the leader in the clubhouse for first coach to get fired.
Yeah, because that's the question I kept bringing up to my listeners, and I'm glad that you were able to articulate that, is it doesn't mean that Doug Peterson is a bad quarterback. I don't think you win a Super Bowl by luck or accident, because there's a lot of things you have to do to get to that point. You think about Sean McVay. He scored 3 points against that same New England team. You think about Kyle Shanahan. You know, everybody says the whiz kid. They were up 28-3. They needed a field goal, didn't get it. And so that's a hard team to go out there and score 40 some odd points against on a big stage like that with Belichick as the defensive coordinator. But I will say this, there leaves a little bit of a question, like, okay, I'm not talking about him as an overall coach. I'm talking about him as the guy that could dig them out of the hole that they're in right now. And I think that's the part. And you said Trevor can change. How difficult is it to uncoach all of that stuff, even for a new person, and get that kid back to who everyone thought he was going to be?
Yeah, if I had that answer, I'd be, I mean, that's the magic crystal. That's that's the magic ball there. That's going to take a special, and maybe Peterson can do it. I mean, you keep bringing up Belichick. I mean, does he want to go to Jacksonville next year? I bet he can change the way the song's being played. I mean, I'm no doubt about that. The culture would change dramatically. I don't know that answer. I mean, I'm sure I still very much believe in Lawrence's talents, his makeup, but it's hard to defend right now. I mean, it really is. He's not played well at all. He's more of the problem than the answer this year.
Wow. Big stuff from Matt Williamson, longtime NFL scout. He knows it and he's seen it. That's what we give you here on Locked On NFL, man. We give it to you twice a day. Tyler Rowland, the Madman, early in the morning with a double shot of NFL Espresso, and then right here at the barbershop, you get stuff like you just got. Make sure you tap in wherever you get your podcast. Listen to them wherever you hear them, and if you watch them, go on YouTube to the Locked On NFL page where you are, hopefully, right now. Third and final segment is coming. We've got a slate of big games. Stephon Diggs playing against his old team, Texans versus Bills. And then we're going to run through the rest of the games of the National Football League. We'll do that in just a second here on Locked On NFL. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by FanDuel. Yeah, man, FanDuel. You know, the same one I've been telling you all about for, about 5 years right now. They bring me so much joy on Sundays, man. Not just the game, but the fact that they're America's #1 sports book, and they have some new things like when you're watching your scores, you can now, in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page without changing pages or refreshing or hoping the Wi-Fi is all right where you're at. No, you ain't got to worry about that stuff, man. Wherever you place your bets, you can still check out all of the action on your bets and even your fantasy team. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets that's guaranteed. Whether you win or not, when you place your first $5 bet, that $200 in bonus bets is going to show up. It doesn't matter whether you win or lose. So make sure you visit America's #1 sports book. That is FanDuel at FanDuel.com. Third and final segment here on Locked On NFL on a Friday. We're going to do a quick rip around of the National Football League, go through all of the games, and let Matt tell you who he thinks is going to win. You don't want to hear me because I'm always wrong about that kind of stuff. But first, the Texans have to solve a certain part of their game against the Bills, and that's the game of the week this week. I want you to hear what John Hickman from Locked On Texans says is the key for them to be better on offense.
They're trying to find a way to get it done, and I think that it's a work in progress to this point because not only is C.J. Stroud going into his second year, but so is Bobby Slowick as an offensive play caller. So they're having some miscues, and I think that this Buffalo Bills game will be a great opportunity to kind of get over, the hump of how can this offense find rhythm and click on all cylinders. Now, a large part of that, Bills fans, Joe Marino, they haven't had Joe Mixon for the past 2 games. Well, Joe, James Cook is comfortable in y'all system up there in Buffalo. He's also healthy. He's been able to play in all 4 games. And not saying you guys are the best run team in the NFL, right? But I think you guys right now are middle of the pack, average about 4.2 yards per carry, something along those lines. Am I right or wrong?
I think the Bills are, in terms of rushing offense, the Bills, in terms of EPA, which I think is a great way to measure it, they're second best in the NFL at 0.14 EPA per rush.
So that's damn good. When I look at the Houston Texans issues right now, week 1, they were able to have Joe Mixon for 4 quarters. Now, granted, that's against the Indianapolis Colts team. That defense can't stop a nosebleed. Week 2, they were able to have Joe Mixon for some part of the game, and, he left that game, injured. The following 2 weeks, no Joe Mixon.
Interesting. Joe Mixon was a head-scratching signing for a lot of people because that's a lot of money for a running back. I saw him the first couple of weeks. He did look good, and they look good. They've looked different since he's been out.
Yeah, they got some problems, and I don't think it's all Mixon, but I do think the ball carrier is part of the problem without question because they ran the ball really poorly last year. This has been a long problem, and they're really about one of the worst rushing teams in the league. And they compound it by being the most penalized team in the league. So they're in 3rd and long all the time. And frankly, I think Stroud's better than ever, or they'd be in a lot worse shape. If it was Joe average quarterback dealing with the circumstances he's been given, it wouldn't be, they might be 0-4 or 1-3, they might be in really bad shape. So I think that's a huge key to this team is they got to clean up the penalties. The running game will probably never be a huge strength, but when I look at this game, I think the Bills, and I'm going back to last week, would rather play the Chiefs, would rather play anyone than the Ravens. The way the Ravens run the football against their nickel front is a death trap for Buffalo. So I think everyone's overreacting to the Bills' quote demise,
Yeah, I think they are too. I think Buffalo probably has a good chance to win this game. I've never seen an offensive line, especially a Hall of Fame level player like Laramie Tunsil. In golf, I think that when your swing is off, they say you got the yips or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
They were booing him last week, man. And Trayvon Walker actually drew like 3 holding penalties on him. And that stuff really doesn't show up in the stats. What has happened in your opinion? When have you ever seen, first of all, a guy that dominant without it being injury related, just all of a sudden look like it just fell off of a cliff?
Yeah, that's a great question because, I mean, if you ask me in the offseason, who are the top 3 or 4 left tackles, he would definitely be on the list. I mean, Trent Williams is one, and then he's in the conversation. Having been in buildings, I bet it's something we don't know. You know, like his mom's sick, or he has a need that we don't know about, or, you know, I mean, I bet there's a human reason for it. And because he has such a long stretch of great play, and it's not like he hit a wall athletically or age-wise. So I'm guessing that probably corrects itself. But again, I mean, last year they had a ton of O-line injuries, couldn't run the ball then, you know. So I know Slowick's considered a great coordinator, and I really have no problems with him. But I also think some of these Wids kid coordinators, I look at Miami, forget about the physicality and the Mike Allstott, Jerome Bettis aspect of play in this game, you know?
I call them fighter pilots. They all look like I was in the Air Force. They all look like Top Gun fighter pilots, man, and I ain't got no problem with that. But the thing is, sometimes you might need a dude whose belly's hanging over his stomach a little bit. All he does is sit there and understand all of the things that you need to do to be a head coach. So many people want head coaches to be that guy. No, play callers, you got to teach. You have to teach, and you have to understand infrastructure, and you have to understand roster building. You have to understand all of that stuff. Let's do a quick rundown, man, if you will. Go ahead and start right there. Who do you have, Bills or Texans?
I'm taking the Bills. I think their problems are a lot more correctable, and I just think the Ravens were an awful matchup for them last week.
The week started off real good with a barn burner last night in Atlanta. We got to go across the pond, though, to see Sam Darnold play against his old team, Jets or Vikings.
I like the Vikings big here. I don't think Rodgers is playing fine. I just don't think he's loving the physicality and the getting hit portion of playing football at this age. And Minnesota is going to dial up blitzes left and right.
Yeah, that body language.
Well.
Yeah, the body language does mean something. Panthers improved. They're 1-3. They're no longer the bottom team in our power rankings. You know, the Jaguars and the Patriots are beneath them. But they play the Bears, who quietly got into 500.
I don't have a lot of faith in the Bears, but they're at home, and I do think their defense is very legit. So I think they win kind of an ugly one at home.
Ravens against Bengals. That game is super, super important for both teams. The Ravens are finally at 500. The Bengals finally won a game, but I think Baltimore might have their number.
I do too, and our buddy Ross Jackson sent out, power ranking stuff, and I filled it out this week. I put Baltimore number 1. I know their record's not the best, but they have figured things out. Cincinnati's run defense is horrific, and I think the Ravens run on everybody and really run on the Bengals this week.
The game we talked about earlier, Colts against my Jaguars.
We think we're getting Flacco. I think Flacco gives them a better chance to win. And I should know this off the top of my head. The Colts always lose in Jacksonville, right?
They always lose here.
Always lose in Jacksonville. I don't know why, but I think the Colts are the better team, but I'm going to put my money on the whatever that curse is of Jacksonville for the Colts. I'll take the Jags.
Yeah, they're putting Tom Coughlin in the Ring of Honor too, so they're wearing those old uniforms. So they that might be a little bit of motivations. The ailing Dolphins versus the not so good Patriots up in Foxborough.
Ooh, brutal.
My man say, ooh.
Man, I did not like where Miami's at. I'll take New England, but these are I mentioned the power ranks. I put Miami 32, and I put New England, I think, 30. I mean, so these are like the worst teams in the league. And I had your Jags 31.
Yeah, you sound like my grandson when I say, which one you want, your peas or your beets? He's like,
right.
Neither one of them, right? All right, Browns.
Come on, Granddad. Give me something better pick than that.
Yeah, right. Browns at 1-3. They're looking ugly, going up against the upstart Commanders in Washington.
I'm not fully bought in on Washington as being this great team, but I am fully bought in on Cleveland being flat out broken. I mean, I will not bet on the Browns. All
right, Raiders and all of their stuff with their receiver wanting to be out of there. At the Broncos, who I talk bad about Sean Payton, man. Sean Payton have found a way to win 2 ugly games.
Yeah, and I really think that Denver defense, especially their defensive front, is a lot better than people think. And as you mentioned, Payton was 8-9 last year with a terrible team. They're 2-2. I mean, I think he knows how to win games in this league. Tough place to play. Give me Denver.
The Arizona Cardinals, who coming into the season, I was like, that's an upstart team. I like Monty Ossenfort as the GM, but they're 1-3 right now, and they're going to San Francisco, who's just holding on until they can get healthy.
Yeah, and they're kind of like the Chiefs, where I think their problems will all work itself out just fine. And Arizona's defense is pretty bad. I think the Niners win this one going away.
A trip out west for Jordan Love after his first week back, going up against the LA Rams.
I'm a big Packer believer at this point.
Yeah.
Both sides of the ball, but especially the offense. I think they win this one handily. By touchdown or more, yeah.
Yeah, Giants going up against Seattle. This is like the weakness of the Giants facing the strength of the Seattle Seahawks. I think Seattle, even with all their defensive injuries, have really, really played well at 3-1.
Yeah, and it doesn't look like Neighbors is going to play. He's still in concussion protocol a day later than you'd hope. And to me, I just don't know where the points come from with the Giants. So give me Seattle here.
Same with me. Now, this is a blast from the past, my childhood. The first football game I ever saw was Lynn Swann stepping on the back of a Dallas Cowboy defensive.
Now you're talking.
There you go, stepping on the back of a defensive back. I was like 5 years old. And then for the next 8 years, I watched Bradshaw and Staubach go at each other. So this is always fun. Cowboys at 2-2 going up to Pittsburgh on Sunday night to play the Steelers.
That's all we've talked about all week. These are, since 1970, all the records and Hall of Famers these two have. And Wig, I'm the same way. I mean, I was born in 73, and I was taught properly that first off, you hate the Raiders, and then you hate the Cowboys, and then you can worry about the division and Browns and Bengals and all that. I mean, because you see the Cowboys as often as you saw the Oakland Raiders back then if you're Steelers. So I think Dallas is in a really bad spot, though. I mean, Tomlin on prime time at home, and no Parsons, no Lawrence. There's no teeth to the defense anymore, and they don't stop the run and they don't run the ball.
And shout out to Fields, man. He's looked
well.
decent, look very decent, playing within himself, and it's worked out for him and the coach, the offensive coordinator right now.
Mm-hmm.
Last game Monday night. I think it's a good game. I really do think it's a good game. Saints at Chiefs.
I do too, and I think the Saints keep it close. I do think the Chiefs have some issues. Saints defense has been kind of underrated, and everyone was talking about how good the offense started, but the defense has been solid. I don't know what the spread in the game is, but I would take the points, and I think the Chiefs probably win it, though.
I want to see what Clint Kubiak's working with, because he went up against somebody last week. I think it was Atlanta, and they kind of didn't look as well as they had looked early in the season. And now we just talked about Spagnuolo. He's going up against one of the GOATs, and we're going to see if that fighter pilot stuff works against the OG defensive coordinator. That's right. All right, man, make sure you check out all the action. Matt, of course, longtime NFL scout Matt Williamson of the Peacock and Williamson podcast, and the first host of the Locked On NFL show. We got to make sure that we acknowledge my brother for that. He'll be with us every single Friday. Make sure you check out all the games this weekend here on Locked On NFL, wherever you get your podcast. We'll have all the action come Monday, and all the postcasts around the National Football League, as well as games end on Sunday. Make sure you check us out. We'll see you. Take care of each other. We'll do the same here on Locked On NFL.